Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to this informational webinar on the Nonprofit Community Recovery Grants, a program in collaboration with ArtsFund and the Washington State Department of Commerce. My name is Sarah Sidman, and I am the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives and Communications at ArtsFund. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a light-skinned white woman with long brown hair, wearing a black shirt and silver jewelry. I am seated in a corner of my office with brightly colored art framing me on either side. As we begin today's webinar, I would like to acknowledge that the city of Seattle, where ArtsFund is based, is on the occupied lands of the Coast Salish people, specifically the ancestral land of the Duwamish, Stillaguamish, Muckleshoot, and Suquamish tribes, who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. I would also like to acknowledge that many with us today are on different territories, and we join you in honoring and recognizing those as well. To make today's event as accessible to those of all abilities, we have a number of accessibility features. We are joined by an ASL interpreter who you can see joining me on the screen. You can also enable automatically generated captions by clicking on the closed caption live transcript button in the meeting control bar and then clicking enable auto transcription. You can then click and drag the provided subtitles on your screen wherever you want them. You can also click on the small arrow to the right of the live transcript button to adjust your subtitle settings or to open the full transcript at any time. You may have already noticed, please be aware the subtitles will not be 100% accurate as they are automatically generated. We have also asked all our speakers to visually describe themselves the first time they speak, as I did at the top of the program. Shortly, you'll hear from Jim Mumford from the Department of Commerce and from Michael Greer, ArtsFund's President and CEO, who will share an overview of the Nonprofit Community Recovery Grants Program. Today's webinar is designed to provide context and clarity around the eligibility and application process for these grants. We will walk you through the application portal and process, and there will be an opportunity for a question and answer session at the end. Please know we also have made a number of questions and answers already available on the program's website, which is www.artsfund.org/NCR grants, and there's an FAQ button. If you have questions that you want to add to today's webinar, please use the Q&A feature. Also know today's webinar will be recorded and posted to the ArtsFund website in the coming days, so you can always go back and revisit the content. Now we'll hear from the Washington State Department of Commerce, who are the originators of this impactful program and are providing the funding behind it. I invite Jim Mumford to unmute and open up your camera and join me on the screen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jim Mumford, and I work with the Washington State Department of Commerce. For those of you who don't know much about the Washington State Department of Commerce, I'll take a moment to introduce us. Our agency's mission is to strengthen communities. We're the one agency in state government that touches every aspect of community and economic development, planning, infrastructure, energy, public facilities, housing, public safety, international trade, broadband, childcare, and more. We work in partnership with local governments, tribes, businesses, and civic leaders throughout the state. To help our state continue to rebound from the economic crisis caused by COVID-19, we've provided more than $1 billion in response funding, including several rounds of emergency relief for about thousands of small businesses and nonprofits. Over the course of the last year, it's become incredibly clear just how important community is to our collective health and economic well-being. And the nonprofit community at large helps to provide the kinds of creative outlets and cultural touchstones that really enable communities to thrive. Simply put, nonprofits are vital to the cities, towns, and neighborhoods across this state. With that in mind, we are very pleased to be partnering with ArtsFund on the Nonprofit Community Recovery Grant Program to deliver over $10 million in grant funding to community organizations across Washington State. On behalf of the Department of Commerce, I appreciate that you took the time to be here today. So thank you again. Now I believe ArtsFund's president and CEO, Michael Greer, is planning to say a few words. So Michael, the floor is yours.
Hey, thanks, Jim. So thank you all for joining us today. My name is Michael Greer, and I am the president and CEO at ArtsFund. I identify as a light-skinned black male. I have no hair, a mustache, and I'm wearing a white button-down shirt and a blue sweater, and I'm sitting in front of a window that looks out into my garden. We are incredibly excited to be partnering with the Washington State Department of Commerce to administer over $10 million in nonprofit community recovery grants to this community. This program will center arts, culture, science, and heritage, along with grants awarded to nonprofit neighborhood associations, sports and recreation organizations, and veterans organizations. This is a first-of-a-kind program and a partnership. And ArtsFund is really excited to be working with the Department of Commerce, leveraging our partnerships statewide and building new relationships, not only to support a broad base of arts and culture, but also to support vital nonprofit community organizations in a number of different service areas across the state. These grants are intended to cover pandemic-related expenses and to help our communities recover. We are honestly humbled to be a part of that effort. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steffi Morrison to talk a little bit more about eligibility.
All right, thank you, Michael. Hi, everyone. My name is Steffi Morrison, and I am the NCR Grants Coordinator at ArtsFund. I identify as a cisgendered, mixed-race Asian American woman. I have dark brown hair, and I'm wearing a black top, and I'm situated against a white wall. So yeah, I wanted to talk a bit more in detail about the eligibility requirements for the NCR grants. The grant program is designed to center arts, cultural, science, and heritage organizations, but grants will also be awarded to nonprofit neighborhood associations, sports and recreation organizations, and veterans organizations. So as we'll see on the screen here, the eligible organizations must meet all of the following criteria. So you must have either 501c3 status or fiscal sponsorship by a 501c3 since fiscal year 2019. Now, you are still eligible if your fiscal sponsor has changed recently, but we'll still need to have consistent federal recognition since fiscal year 2019. You'll also need to have a 2019 annual operating budget greater than $25,000 and be located in Washington State. On the next slide, we'll go into more about these 4 focus areas. So your organization will need to operate in at least one of these areas. So the top one here, we see arts, culture, science, and heritage. So these are organizations that are defined with whose primary mission is to offer or promote artistic, creative, cultural, scientific, technology, or heritage programs. So these can include dance, theater, music, zoos, festivals, literary arts, just to name a few. And you'll have an opportunity on your application just to select your top 2. For neighborhood organizations, so these are more narrowly defined as organizations whose mission is to make improvements to a community's social health, safety, well-being, and overall functioning within a well-defined geographic area. So these organizations must be focused specifically on a geographic area, and it should be referenced throughout their outreach and literature. So eligible organizations include, for example, the South Perry Business and Neighborhood Association in Spokane. The ineligible organization types in the neighborhood association category includes daycares and preschools, food banks, homeowners associations, boys and girls clubs, homeless shelters, medical facilities, community centers, senior centers, and YMCAs. So those are ineligible. For sports and recreation organizations, so these are defined as orgs whose primary mission is to provide sports or physical recreation programs for children and or adults. Programs must have designated coaches and organized practices. So this could be the Kitsap Tennis and Athletic Center. And then lastly, we have veterans organizations. So these are defined as orgs whose mission is to serve veterans through their programming or services. So an example could be the Nisei Veterans Committee here in Seattle. And veterans orgs that do not have 501c3 status are not eligible. So please note that the applicant organization's primary mission must align with at least one of these grant focus areas, meaning that they cannot apply on behalf of a program that they might administer. So next, we're going to cover the application process. So when you visit the ArtsFund NCR Grants page website, which we'll show on the slide here, you will see a big red application button. And that application button will link you to the WiseHive portal, which is where the application lives. Once you create a WiseHive login, you can revisit the portal as many times as you need. You can save drafts. And then you can also preview the questions in advance if you click on that link there, also circled in yellow. So now I would like to turn it over to Sujin Chan, who is going to actually walk us through a sample application in the WiseHive portal. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sujin Chan. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm serving as the grants portal support person for the NCR process. I'm a light-skinned, middle-aged Korean American woman with medium dark brown hair, wearing a rust-colored top and black sweater, and am in front of a background of pink tulips. I'm calling in from the Swinomish Indian Reservation in Skagit County, which is situated on the traditional homelands of many Coast Salish bands and tribes. I am going to walk you through how to complete the forms in the grants portal. So there are 3 forms that comprise the complete application. We strive to make this application relatively simple. If you have your last 3 budget years as numbers on hand, your most recent completed 990 or 990 EZ tax form ready to upload, and the information on the racial identities of your board and staff already collected, this online application could take less than an hour to complete. For this demonstration, I have mock responses already ready so that we can walk through this in about maybe 15 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and click on this application button here. And that will lead us to this application overview dashboard. And then we're going to click on create a profile to get started. This is the first of the 3 forms that we're going to complete. So in this mock, I created a sample made up dance organization called Dance Works Swinomish Laconer, and it presents modern dance compositions that incorporate traditional Coast Salish, Indigenous, and early American dance. And it's used to showcase the history of movement arts practice in the lands we now commonly know as the Skagit Valley. So in this situation, it asks, does your organization have 501c3 status or fiscal sponsorship by 501c3? So we're going to say yes. And has it had that status since fiscal year 2019? We're going to also say yes. Does your organization have a 2019 operating budget greater than $25,000? What happens if I say no? If any of these requirements has the answer no, you'll see this message. Thank you for your interest. You're not currently eligible to apply for the NCR grant. Well, we know your time is valuable, and so we don't want to waste your efforts on the back end. So we want to save them in the front end. But let's say that the answer is yes. So that's going to let us continue on to this next section. Does your organization operate in one or more of the following focus areas? And those are the focus areas that Steffi just mentioned. And in this situation, it's going to be an arts organization. If you select arts, culture, science, or heritage, it's going to give you a subcategory section. And in this situation, we said it's a dance organization. It also gives you an option to select a secondary focus area. In this situation, we don't have a secondary focus area, so I'm just going to continue. Just so you know, if your organization does not fall under arts, culture, science, heritage, none of the other organization focus areas has a subcategory section. Okay, so now we're gonna fill out the rest of this information. So I said that our organization is called DanceWorks Swinomish Laconer. And I'm gonna say that our mock organization has a fiscal sponsor, and that's what I'll put here. And in this situation, I'm gonna say that our organization started on May 1st, 2015. It does open up a calendar tool, but if you also follow the exact month, day, year format with a 4-digit year, you can also just input it that way. And in our organization, we're gonna say that the fiscal year ends on June 30th. So I'm gonna say 06/30. So since the fiscal year ends on June 30th, the most completed fiscal year would have been last year. So I'm gonna go ahead and choose June 30th, 2020. We're gonna put in a mailing address. This is all self-explanatory, hopefully. And then a drop down for your county. I'm in Skagit County. And then your EIN, which is also known as the business tax ID. That's a 9-digit number. So in this situation, we'll just do 9 digits. And your website. Let's see, DanceWorks Swinomish Laconer.org. And then your mission statement. Here we have a pre-prepared mission statement. Now it's going to ask for your most recent 990. And that's where we're going to click on select to upload. And it will upload the file and then just select the year of your last 990. I'm going to say 2019. Okay. Now we're going to do our primary contact information, the person's title. I'm going to say this title's Dancing Queen, your contact information. And then there's an option for a secondary contact if you would like. But we don't need to in this one, so I'm just going to create the profile. And we are now done with our first form. So once your profile is complete, it gives you an option to continue on to the next 2 forms. And we'll do that by clicking on Get Started. So what you'll see here now is the 2 additional forms. One of them is the NCR application, and the second one is the NCR demographics survey. And for here, we're going to start with the application. And what you will see, first of all, is the financial information. So in this imaginary organization, our operating expenses in 2019 were $55,000, but the pandemic hampered operations greatly. So in fiscal year 2020, the expenses will end up being $20,000. But we're planning on a great recovery in 2021. Maybe not fully, but we'll budget, let's say $40,000. Okay, the next section, earned revenue. So this earned revenue for this organization comes from, let's say, contract income and ticket sales. Well, the ticket sales were completely decimated in 2020 because of the pandemic. So let's say in 2019, our earned revenue was 30, but in 2020 it was 0. And we're hoping for some recovery in 2021, so we're budgeting 9,000. Okay, well, and next is the contributed revenue, which is like individual donations, grants, fundraising dollars. And again, we saw a huge drop in 2020, let's say from 25,000 to 10,000, but we're hoping for some recovery in 2021. So let's say we're budgeting for 20,000 in 2021. This organization also had to severely cut the hours of its only staff person, who's the director. So let's say that part-time director made 30,000, or was budgeted for 30,000 in 2019, but we had to cut that person's salary in half in 2020, but we're hoping to reinstate most of their hours by 2021. Okay, so that is the financial section for the application. Should be pretty easy if you have those numbers in front of you. The next section is about the impact of COVID-19 on program delivery and revenue. So in the past 12 months, COVID-19 and resulting public health mandates have negatively impacted our ability to deliver our mission. Well, we said yes, because we mostly do dance performances. So I'm going to say strongly agree. And over the next 12 months, our organization expects a more than 30% reduction in earned revenue. I said that we went from 30,000 and we're anticipating less than a third of that in 2021. So I'm going to say here also strongly agree. And then the last question is, the COVID-19 permanently shifted the way that our organization plans to deliver our services and programs. Well, this organization, let's say the staff got together, the board got together and decided that the mission is still best served when dance performances can be done in person. So I'm going to say disagree. We're not going to permanently change the way that we deliver our programs. Now we have 3 questions here about the types of programs we offer to specific identity groups. So over the past 12 months, our organization conducted programming specifically designed to provide services and programming to Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. Well, I did mention that our organization mainly works with choreographers and dancers from the Swinomish Indian tribal community and predominantly presents on the reservation or the neighboring city of La Conner. So I'm going to say agree. The next question is about programming to people with disabilities. And in this organization, that's not true. So I'll say disagree. And then finally, the last question is about services and programming to people who identify as LGBTQ+. In this situation, again, that's not true, so I'll say disagree. Okay, so the next section is about how we intend to use our awarded funds. And there's 6 options to choose from, and you only really need to choose the top 2. You can choose more than 2 if you'd like. But for us in this situation, I'm going to say that our money is going to go towards programming costs, PPE costs, and salary. And later on, when we get to the narrative, I will explain that more. All right, so what is the organization's requested amount of funding? In the budget above, I mentioned that our operating expenses will end with a $10,000 budget deficit, but thankfully this organization had some cash reserves, let's say it's $3,000, so that really left us with $7,000 shortfall in fiscal year 2020. So I'm going to choose $5,000 to $74.99. Okay. If awarded, can you attest that the funding will be used to cover expenses incurred between March 1st, 2020 and June 30th, 2021 due to financial hardship caused by the pandemic, and that this funding will not be used for expenses that are already covered by other COVID-19 related public funding sources, and that does include Paycheck Protection Program funds? So I can attest to that. I'll say yes. And if awarded, can you attest to all of the following? No person receiving services and/or assistance that is funded with this money will be required to participate in any religious workshop, exercise, or instruction as a condition of receiving assistance, that the funds will not be used to fund religious workshop, exercise, or instruction, and that these funds will not be used for any ineligible expenses under the Federal CARES Act, which include personal non-business expenses, payment of state and federal taxes, and lobbying expenses or activities. So yes, I'm going to say yes. And then finally, we just get to our last question, which is the only narrative question, and it's 75 words or less. So you will see, I prepared a 75-word response. The 75 words is not that much, but in here, this is where I explained that the funding will enable us to stabilize from 2020, the challenging financial instability, to pay off our credit card debt that was used to purchase PPE in the last year, to pay our choreographers and dancers, and to allow our directors' efforts to be more fully focused on the programming that advances our mission. So here we are, we're done. I'm going to mark complete. Okay, and then finally we'll go to our last form, which is the NCR demographic survey. Open that up. And what you should see here is pretty self-explanatory. This form's to report the number of board and staff members who identify with a specific racial category. So each field is required. If the answer is none, you do need to then put 0. If you have an individual that identifies with more than one race, please do not put them in the individual categories because it will give you the wrong number at the bottom as it auto-populates. Put them in this category. So, and you also have the option of putting don't know if this is the type of statistics that you don't currently track. Hopefully you will in the future. Yeah, and I said that we had one staff person, didn't I? Okay. Okay, so what you'll see here at the very bottom is that it auto-populates your total staff and board. So you should make sure that that matches what's actually happening in reality, and then you can mark complete. So finally, this should return you back to the dashboard, and when you're done finishing with all your 3 forms, you can press the submit button right here at the top right corner, and you are complete. You should receive a confirmation email within an hour from the grants portal that your application has been submitted. So I know I kind of flew through that application walkthrough. We are recording this webinar that will be made available by tomorrow. So please feel free to use this webinar to use as a reference if you want to go through that again. And if you have any other questions about completing the application, you can always email us at ncrgrants@artsfund.org. And with that, I'm going to hand this back over to Sarah.
Great. Thank you, Sujin. That was a lot of information. Don't go too far because I'm about to invite you right back on the screen. Now is when we're going to open the program up to the Q&A. There have been a lot of questions coming in. Thank you all for your questions during this. We have many hundreds of folks on the webinar today, so we're not going to be able to get to each of the individual questions, but we're going to try and address some of the themes that are recurring. Please feel free to check our FAQs on our website, as well as to reach out to the email address Sujin just mentioned, ncrgrants@artsfund.org, to talk about any questions that are specific to your organization. A lot of the questions that are in the Q&A are very specific to one organization. And with today's information session focused on making sure that all eligible organizations have the tools and understanding they need to successfully complete the application, we'll be addressing some of the broader questions that have repeated themselves first. But again, please reach out with your questions to ncrgrants@artsfund.org. So now I'm going to touch upon a few questions that have popped up, but I'd also like to invite Michael, Jim, Julia Turlichamp from the Department of Commerce, and Sujin to join me back on the screen to help field questions that have come up. And thank you all for your participation in the Q&A. I'm going to start with a couple of eligibility questions. Someone had asked whether or not some of those exclusions and definitions were available on the website. And yes, all the information Steffi shared is there on artsfund.org/NCR grants. But in answer to a number of the recurring questions about museums, yes, museums are eligible under the Arts, Culture, Heritage, and Science category. And for those who were asking about 990Ns for organizations with the smaller budget thresholds, Michael, we are accepting those as an upload as well. Great. Many are asking a question just about the distinction between contributed income and earned income. Michael, do you want to touch upon that a little bit, and whether contributed income also includes COVID-related grant income?
It does, Sarah.
Great. And to dive a little bit deeper, earned income would be monies that you might have received from ticket sales, from memberships, from programs, from classes that you might offer, services that you provided for which you received a fee. And contributed income, I believe Sujin mentioned, is grant dollars, like Michael just said, COVID-related income, foundation support, public support, and private support. Sujin, is there anything else you would want to say about the distinction between earned and contributed?
Like private donations, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great. And a couple of questions are coming up regarding the distinctions between operating expenses and personnel expenses. Sujin, do you want to talk a little bit more about how they should fill out that part of the form?
Sure. On the financial information section, the first question is about the total operating expenses. That should include the personal expenses. And then that fourth question down just asks you to pull out which part of the operating expenses go to personnel. So the top number should be bigger than the fourth number.
Thanks. Many have also asked about organizations that are totally staffed by volunteers, and whether or not a 501c3 needs to have paid staff to be eligible. No, you do not need to have paid staff to be eligible. But in terms of those demographic categories of board versus staff, the staff is not meant to be the entirety of the volunteer base of your organization. It would just be the titled staff who are playing essentially the administrative roles there. Michael, do you have any other comments to say about staffing and personnel?
No, I think that pretty much covered it, Sarah.
Great. There are some questions, Jim, about is there a specific timeline that the funding must be used by? Of course, in the application, we've said it's very clear that the expenses need to have been incurred between a particular time period that ends on June 30th of this year. But do they have to have spent the funds by that same time period?
That's really, thanks, Sarah. That's really an accounting question. And I think it's best to talk to your organization's CFO or to a professional accountant or someone like that to sort of talk about how best to account for this funding. And really, it's about finding expenses that were incurred between March of last year and June 30th of this year as a way to sort of properly account for the funding that we're giving you. So it's not a question of spending it as much as it is about accounting for it properly.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah.
Sorry, can I please clarify that the funding is required by statute, by the state statute to go to expenses between March 1st, 2020 and June 30th, 2021. So that's to Jim's point. We encourage you to work with your financial advisors or planners to mark that, but there is going to be no documentation that you must provide us as Department of Commerce, but you will, if you do, for example, get audited, you will have to account for how those expenses have been used and make sure it's within that time range. That is absolutely critical.
Thanks, Julia. We're getting a lot of questions related to fiscal sponsorship, so we're just going to add some information on the FAQs of our website because there have been a lot of specific questions around that. And I'm just sorry, I'm scrolling through the questions as they're coming in. Michael, a question is coming up, or this might also be a question for Jim. What does most recently completed fiscal year mean? For organizations whose fiscal years are about to end, what should they be uploading regarding their most recently completed fiscal year?
I think we just keep it as that says, so the most recently completed fiscal year, by the time that the grant by the time that the application is written.
Great. Some questions are coming up about what about 501c6 or C7 organizations as per the eligibility requirements that are both in the materials and then also at the beginning of the application portal. This program is designed only for 501c3s and fiscally sponsored organizations. Sorry, it's very difficult to read all these questions and monitor at the same time. My apologies for little delays here. Michael, Jim, Julia, or Sujin, is anything popping out to you?
Yes, I would, if I can just share, Department of Commerce has partnered with a number of state agencies and external partners like ArtsFund, who have been great at helping us launch a number of different grant programs. We are in the process right now, of course, for one for small businesses. I saw a question about farmers markets. We just closed a program, but there is ongoing conversations about farmers markets through our partner, Washington State Department of Agriculture. I highly recommend that you look either at commercegrants.com, or you can just Google Washington State Department of Agriculture, and they have a number of different programs. We've done interagency agreements with Department of Labor and Industries, with the Commission for Hispanic Affairs, with Employment Security Departments, again on grant programs and other types of technical assistance. You also can, we are working, I've seen questions about veterans organizations. There are some organizations that might be best fit for this program. We are also talking and working on details that we will share soon with our sister agency, Department of Veteran Affairs, to find ways to support those organizations that don't fit this particular program. So though that there's a lot going on and we know that, just please refer yourself to commercegrants.com. It's a great one place to go and visit to see some of those opportunities, and we will continue to update that website for those opportunities.
The only thing that I would add to Julia's comments is that for veterans organizations, there are 501c3 veterans organizations in Washington State that are eligible for this program and certainly encouraged to apply. So we hope you do.
I'm noticing a number of questions about, we have an arts program, but we're really a social service organization, or we're human, we're a food bank, but we have, an arts program. So the definition of organizational category does say that your primary mission is either arts, culture, heritage, neighborhood association, etc. So if you run a program that is arts related or sports related, but that's actually not your primary mission, you would not qualify.
Michael, we're nearing the end of our time. Did you have anything you wanted to, any of the questions you wanted to tackle, or any additional comments you wanted to make?
Sure. I just wanted to reiterate the fact that if you have specific questions about your organization or a specific situation within your organization or your application, please reach out to our email through the website, because we'll try to answer all of those in a more personalized format.
Great. And I think, Sujin, did you mention that folks can save their application as they go? So if they're working through it, they can save it before they get to that submit portion?
Yeah, once you hit submit, it's submitted, but up until then, you can continue to make changes.
And if you have questions for those who have submitted an application, you can also still use that email because you submitted it very quickly on the very first day, and reach out to the ncrgrants@artsfund.org email. Thank you all. We are right about at our time, so I'm going to hand it back to Michael to close us out. We are incredibly excited and honored to be partnering with the Department of Commerce on this very impactful statewide grant, and thank all of you for your interest and for joining us today. Michael?
Thanks, Sarah. I just wanted to say thank you to all of you that are here and all the work that you're doing in our communities. I want to say thanks to Jim, Julia, Sarah, Steffi, our ASL interpreters. It is important work that we're doing. We're really excited to be administering these funds, and we're excited to be promoting all of the work that you're doing across the state. So with that, thank you very much. And please don't forget, if you have specific questions, please reach out and we'll make sure that we handle those individually.